Adventure Time has been on the air since 2010, but despite its theme song promising fun that will never end, that fun has now ended in September 2018. And now that it is over, I feel like I can finally talk about it. Because that's something you get from an ending. A sense of a whole. A cohesive work that can be analysed in context, without the messy, unpredictable whims of something in progress. But that's exactly what Adventure Time has always been about. Being in progress. Right up to the end. This is the ending of a show that has consistently been about a lack of endings. Everything continues in some way. Everything cycles. Everything stays. In a letter to their publisher, George Eliot wrote that conclusions are the weak points of most authors, but some of the fault lies in the very nature of a conclusion, which is, at best, a negation. So, how should we negotiate endings? And in a landscape that defines itself by endurance and renewal, what does it even mean to end? Adventure Time is set in the shadow of what could possibly be considered the ultimate end, the apocalypse. From opening with unexploded bombs to flashbacks to what appears to be nuclear war, morbid reminders of this end are scattered around the brightly coloured land of Ooo, just as the persistence of the apocalypse narrative itself serves as a constant reminder of our own end, the catastrophic end of everything. Commonly preceded by declarations that the end is nigh, this is a future where life as we know it has already ended. But of course, that isn't to say that life has ended. Far from it. This is life begun anew. Writer Heather Smith positioned Adventure Time as post-apocalyptic, in a way that has more in common with Japanese anime than most Western apocalypse narratives. This is a familiar backdrop in anime, with Japan being sadly closer to the realities of nuclear apocalypse in the West. But Adventure Time connects more specifically with the films of Hayao Miyazaki. Smith writes, "The apocalypse hovering in the background of his films are more in keeping with the origins of the word, which isn't so much about destruction as it is about revealing, or folding something open. This certainly reflects how apocalypse is used in Adventure Time. And actually, this interpretation of a word that has become synonymous with the end as, instead, a change, a continuation, a revelation, could be taken as the entire ethos of the show.
And from that soil, a new plant burst to life."
The episode Food Chain, written, storyboarded and directed by guest director Masaki Yuasa, distills these ideas of regeneration and rebirth into a familiar image, focusing ultimately on this transformation, which is a recurring process on the show, from shapeshifting to temporary mutation to complete regeneration, the process of becoming something almost unrecognizable. And transformation is built into the medium of animation, the ability for animated forms to break down and remold, to transform effortlessly from one form to another. Director and film theorist Sergei Eisenstein argued that this is a fundamental quality of animation, that a quality of plasmaticness is demonstrated in its ability to regenerate or collapse its dimensions at any moment in an ultimate fusion of manifold lines. This resonates with Deleuze's description of the cartoon figure, which is always in the process of being formed or dissolving through the movement of lines. The Warner Brothers cartoon Duck Amuck from 1953 provides an inventory of the material conditions of animation. Here, Daffy Duck is incorrectly drawn, coloured, voiced, and sometimes even erased. Similar meta-jokes are later made in cartoons like BoJack Horseman and, of course, Adventure Time. It's as if, in both animation and the land of Ooo, the stability of anything is constantly under question.
How's the drawing?
Just squiggles.
And yet, Adventure Time is also about constants, cycles, repetition. This is the other theme of Food Chain. It's a transformation, but one that repeats itself. A change that, as a pattern, never changes. And this battle between change and constant is one that is itself repeated. The comet is said to be a catalyst of great change, but it's also endlessly returning. Finn's past lives indicate reincarnation, a constant soul through different bodies that seem to frequently lose their right arm. Even the apocalypse, the ultimate image of destruction, of finality, the end, is repeated, not only in Adventure Time but in the cultural consciousness it was born into. But what Adventure Time cycles seem to suggest is the potential for growth by way of return, that restoring the status quo doesn't have to mean nothing's changed. Marceline's reversion to a vampire at the end of Stakes doesn't mean she's the same as before.
Now I'm a vampire with fresh mortal memories and, I don't know, more empathy or something? More grown up.
Change isn't just about appearances.
The shapes are always changing. Changing is their normal state, like us. Even if we're not changing on the outside, we're changing on the inside constantly.
Adventure Time has always had a complicated relationship with the status quo, which often defines these kinds of episodic shows, especially children's shows, and defies narrative conclusion. If everything always returns to the beginning, nothing ever ends, and nothing can ever change. But Adventure Time increasingly questioned that format. Finn aging, new swords, different outfits, and the emotional growth of characters who initially appeared as archetypes, their complexity progressing in line with the perspective of the show's growing protagonist. In their novel, White Noise, Don DeLillo states that all plots tend to move deathward, and it's in this way that Adventure Time has always been driven towards its own end. The episode Hall of Egress visualizes this deliberate forward movement, referencing the trails famously used in fiction as the way back, the breadcrumbs in Hansel and Gretel, or the loose thread in Theseus and the Minotaur.
Better leave a little trail in case I get lost. Breadcrumb style.
Finn repeatedly tries to use these methods to exit the maze, but always finds himself back at the beginning. Only in giving up his clothes, a symbol of what so often makes the cartoon character themselves, can he finally escape. Not by going back, but in moving forward.
No more threads to follow. No more egress.
Adventure Time presents this loop, all its loops, not as a return, but as a continuation. Much like the Shermie and Beth sequences that bookend Adventure Time's finale, George Eliot included epilogues in all but the last of their novels, allowing us to project ourselves, apocalypse-style, past the end. And it's in the finale of Middlemarch, the last book of which is aptly titled Sunset and Sunrise, that even Eliot acknowledges that every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. But at the risk of stating the obvious, it is still an ending. And it's often being commented on that finishing a work of fiction is like a shadow of death, that there's a grieving period. The opening chapter of Frank Kermode's The Sense of an Ending, amusingly titled The End, explains that the end is a figure of their own deaths, so perhaps are all ends in fiction, which suggests an inherent parallel between the two. And speaking more to experience, as author Paul Sweeney is oft quoted, "You know you've read a good book when you turn the last page and feel a little as if you have lost a friend." Because that feeling of potential, of movement that you get when something is still in progress, you can't ever get that back. Its story and characters, which once seemed so fluid, have solidified, and nothing can make them breathe like they used to. But Adventure Time differentiates between the end of the show and the idea of the end in a grander sense.
That's the end.
I thought this story was about the end of Ooh, but what happened to Phil and Jake after that?
You know, they kept living their lives.
The end of Adventure Time doesn't have to mean the end of our relationship with it. Like Jermaine says, it's hard to tell when an abstract is finished. But art and fiction are also about when you choose to end something. As much as transformation is built into the medium of animation, so is the possibility to not change, to keep everything in a perpetual present, unending and unchanging. Animation has the freedom to collapse and regenerate its forms into anything, but it also has the ultimate freedom, that it doesn't have to. Unlike a human body, a character can stay the same forever, but Adventure Time was never supposed to be like that. It encourages change, to allow ourselves to change, to not get stuck looking backwards, It embraces endings. But ever true to its cyclical nature, Adventure Time's own farewell reminds us of an intrinsic interconnectivity between past, future, chaos, harmony, happiness, sadness, endings, beginnings, ice cream waffles.
How long are you gonna list stuff?
It's a long list.
But while the way one thing becomes another is more easily depicted as a physical transformation, this can apply to interior conditions too.
Time is an illusion that helps things make sense. So we are always living in the present tense. It seems unforgiving when a good thing ends. But you and I will always be back then.
I've had a hard time articulating exactly what BMO's final song evokes for me. It encompasses so many ideas around time, memory, and mourning that I don't want to reduce it to an inferior summary of its parts. But just personally, I think what gets me is essentially this sentiment from C.S. Lewis. The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal. Because we're always living in the present tense, it's easy to forget that what has happened and what will happen are important too. This transition makes the whole, and you can't just have one part of it. And the happiness will come back, just in a new form. After all, if sweetness can win, and it can, I'll still be here tomorrow to high-five you yesterday. And even when every ending is also a beginning, Adventure Time still taught us how to say goodbye.
Come along with me.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching. I have a lot of things to say in this outro. Firstly, this video was made partly in response to Mikey Neumann's Lessons Animation Taught Us video. I've linked to both this video and a whole playlist of Lessons Animation Taught Us videos in the description. Also linked in the description, I've launched a Patreon page, so if you hadn't heard and would like to support the videos on this channel, go check it out. Thanks again for watching.